I'm curious to hear how our next speakers are going to use the skills of love and connection in the challenging endeavors that they are facing. The IDGs is an initiative that is set up to integrate inner work into organizations and systems because we believe that there is such a high potential to create those cultures for inner work. We are at the beginning of this transformation, but we already see it happening. And now we want to hear some of the stories where this is already taking shape. To guide us through this conversation, it is my pleasure to invite the woman on stage who's taking the IDGs from good old Sweden out into the world. She herself has worked in 64 countries, and she gives all her superpowers to creating this critical mass of people and systems that are working with the IDGs with all her energy, her fierce assertiveness, and her humor. Please welcome the moderator of this session, the director of the IDG Global Collaboration, Åsa Jarskog.
Oh, hello. Can you imagine I'm standing here and Jennifer Garby Berger was just here? I feel so privileged to be here with you today. I feel that we have so much in common, and that's beautiful. And yet, I was just introduced as the person who has worked in 64 countries. And most of those countries were in what we call the non-Western world, in places where people have never heard about the IDGs, in places where people are struggling with challenges like poverty, hunger, no access to education, no access to health services, no access to water. And I was the minority. And I want to take this opportunity to just give an extra thought to those people who are today and have been suffering from conflict and war. From the bottom of my heart, which is going to come up here, I hope. If you wish, and if you can, join me in a 30-second meditation of compassion for those people. But not a sitting down, closing your eyes, standing up with eyes open in sympathy for the people who are suffering in conflict and war today. Thank you. Thank you. So us, the majority here, we are here because we have realized the power of the IDGs. And when you really integrate the IDGs on an individual level. And that's not easy. That's hard work. But what we try to do in my work is to take it even further than the individual level. Because the real potential of the IDGs is when you go beyond that. It's when you can integrate it into organizations. And I know that there are many of you out here doing wonderful work trying to help organizations integrate in the development into their organizations. And it's even harder to, after that, integrate in the development into the services of the organizations. That can be teaching in a school, or it can be a policy developed by a government. And eventually to integrate in the development into the systems, into the societies. And that's where the real potential is. Integration of inner development from individual, organization, and systemic level is what we call the IDG institutionalization strategy. So all these fancy words, but we want some examples. How do you really do this? Have people really done that? Would you like some examples? Yes. Yay! And we have here 4 people who are trailblazers. They have actually done it. It's not easy. They're going to share their challenges, but they're doing it, and it's possible. So let's get inspired by the panel of Kristen Cordell, who is a fellow of the White House Leadership Development Program. Welcome, Kristen. We have Dr. Masamba Toy, who is Project Executive of the Global Innovation Hub of UNFCCC. We have Peggy Dulani, who is the founder of chair of the Synergos Institute. And we have Aitor Rodriguez, who is the executive director of the first IDG Centre in the world, called ALIARSE, from Costa Rica. Kristen, you shared with me that you came to the IDGs, or perhaps the IDGs came to you after you had worked over 10 years for sustainable development across the world in countries like Lebanon, Liberia, and Afghanistan. And you are now working at the White House, where your aim is to integrate inner development into the biggest employer in the world, which is the US government. Now, how come you wanted to do that? What journey led you to that? Where did you get the crazy idea from? How have you worked with this integration? And what progress and challenges can you share with us here?
Thank you so much, Åsa, and thank you for having me today. It's a real honor to be here. I was walking around during lunch, and I was just wondering about all of you and how you arrived here, such a diverse and spirited group. Really curious about that. As Åsa mentioned, I arrived here following 12 years of policy work in the development space, and actually got to help negotiate the SDGs, the framework in which we're sort of thinking about today as well, and spent a lot of time living and working abroad, a number of hardship posts, but realizing that we were falling short of our ambitions and working in some really complex contexts. And as you mentioned, after working in Afghanistan, I found myself having this pivotal moment when the US left that country, and I saw not only the plight of the Afghan people, but also the plight of my colleagues and peers who had given so much to their work there, who had given really their whole selves. And I remember I was visiting my parents' home, and I was sitting on their garage floor. It was really cold concrete floor, just watching it all unravel. And I thought, how could we have done this differently? How could we do this differently? How could we try for something other than this? And maybe it wouldn't have made a difference, but maybe it would, and it deserves to be tried. And that brings me to my work today. As Åsa mentioned, I have the distinct pleasure of helping think through the climate and sustainability training for the US's largest employer, the federal government, 2 million employees strong. And we've been piloting and testing a number of new ways to do that. And I'll never forget, one of the first trainings I piloted was for an executive group, a group of upcoming executives in the government. And I was on a very serious panel. And we were talking about climate and sustainability and these really technical issues. And during the Q&A, one of the rising executives raised their hand and said, super interesting. How do we do this work given the complexities we're facing? And I thought back to that moment on the garage floor. And instead of launching into a policy or strategy or executive order, instead I said, we invest in our people, in our resilience, in our perseverance, in our ability to collaborate. And suddenly the room, it was 100 people, not as big as this room, but suddenly the whole room got quiet and really present, because those rising executives had been waiting for someone to give them permission to move in a space where they were investing in their own resilience and taking on those challenges. So I've been really fortunate, and we can bring up the slide. I'm by no means doing this work alone. In fact, I am just here to be the voice of my amazing colleagues who are doing this work. We have a coalition of teams working across the U.S. interagency to really try to pilot, just like I was during that training, to pilot some new activities. My colleagues at NOAA and EPA and a number of other groups, shout out to Frank and Haley, they've created this U.S. climate literacy guide to basically give guidance on the challenge. What is the challenge that our employees are facing on climate change? But they've actually gone a step further, and they are part of a coalition of 18 or so different organizations who have just created the Transformational Skills Guide. And this version is actually on the web for draft consultation. So it's a really exciting document that just says not only that this is an imperative, but here's how we do it, and it uses the IDGs. So it's a first of its type working draft of how to do this work. We'll just go to the next slide quickly. These two documents launched at Harvard recently, and I was so honored to host Jan and his team at the White House to talk about them as well. We had chief learning officers there, we had human resource people, we had sustainability teams. It was really exciting to see that. And so just circling back, there's a QR code so you can check out the Transformational Skills Guide. But just circling back here in closing to what brought me here, I want to continue to do good for those doing good. And I think that's a goal that we can achieve together utilizing the IDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So let's move on to Masamba. You are the head of the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub. It's a movement at the forefront of driving innovation and behavior change to support climate and sustainability actions. If I ask you exactly the same questions as Kirsten, what is your story?
Thank you, Åsa, and good afternoon to all of you. Very pleased to have this opportunity to interact with you. So the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub that I'm leading has a one-fold vision: to leverage innovation, to contribute in providing to the many people, no one being left behind, flourishing life, which is a more comprehensive level of well-being, while keeping human activities within the planetary boundaries. It means while being aligned with the climate goal, the goal on biodiversity, the goal on land regeneration, and using natural resources within the planetary boundaries. So flourishing life is most of the time associated to optimal human functioning and personal growth, as well as fulfillment. It actually involves living in accordance with one's natural way of living deeply a meaningful, engaged, and purposeful life that can lead to the achievement of full potential of the human. So inner development involves self-awareness as well as purpose. It involves emotional competence as well as mindfulness. It involves contentment. It involves growth mindset and also fulfillment. Therefore, it's a key leverage point for the achievement of the goal of flourishing life. And this is why we have considered inner development as an objective by itself. But it's also a means to foster outer action and interaction, and doing it in a very effective manner to achieve system change, as much as outer action and interaction are also catalysts for inner development. Indeed, the reality is that action reflects our current state of inner development, as well as the interaction framework in which we are evolving, while being also catalyst for further growth. In adopting specific behavior and reflecting on past experience, as well as interacting with people that have achieved their full development, we can actually accelerate inner development, deepen self-awareness, emotional competence, as well as ethical understanding. A very important point is to say that while inner development aspects such as self-awareness, passions, most of the time start from internal reflection, internal insight, they can only be turned into inner development if they are operationalized through outer action and interaction. We can meditate on passions, we can meditate on self-control, but it can only be cultivated and embodied through action. And if you are able to combine in an effective manner inner development and outer action for system change, then we can build the society of our dream. A society that is productive rather than extractive, a society that is regenerative rather than destructive, a society that is empowering rather than alienating, where we can provide flourishing life to the many people, and jobs that are meaningful, purposeful, that they can enjoy and undertake with passion. And only then we will be able to contribute to realizing the vision of peace, security, and human dignity on which the UN is founded. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Masamba, for sharing that. And Peggy, you are the founder of Synergos, a global organization that builds capacity in different parts of the world for bridging across divides on issues of poverty, injustice, and climate through inner work, systems thinking, and inclusive collaboration. What do you want to share with us?
Well, that was a mouthful. And so maybe I'll start with a story. In India, in the early 2000s, we were asked to participate in an effort to reduce child malnutrition in the state of Maharashtra, which is a state of 100 million people, by bringing together people from different sectors and coming through a learning process that would end up in creative solutions. We had no idea how this was going to be achievable. And we partnered with an organization that was very corporate, very good in its values and its processes, but they thought that social change happened in 6 months. So they left after 6 months after teaching us their very wonderful process, which is a version of the Theory U process. And we stayed for 7 years. And at the end, when the corporates who were funding it said, okay, we're done, we had no evidence that we were done. So it was very scary. But later, UNICEF did a study of malnutrition programs around the world. And in fact, statewide, which we could hardly believe, the instance of child malnutrition among those actual severe stunting of those under 2 had been reduced by 40%. This is quite amazing in that the very good experiments that were implemented were only in 5 districts of the state. And people changed all the time. This is one of the challenges, by the way, that people change jobs. It was the government and private sector. The conclusion we came to was that it was the trust that was built among the very diverse participants who had, by the way, because they moved all the time to different jobs, had taken the methodology with them and inside themselves. So it was the inner knowing, the inner process that those people had taken into their different jobs around the state that had spread the methodology unbeknownst to us. That's one example. Secondly, we've been working more recently in Bangladesh, initially because of the funder, which was the Bloomberg Philanthropies, around the issue of child drowning, which is a symptom of a problem, not the root of a problem. But in the usual methodology that we use, which combines systems thinking with partnership building and inner work, our fantastic team inside the country, one of whom is here today, we're able to not only find the right stakeholders, but also find the key leader in the government, because in many countries, if you're going to go to scale, you have to work with the government, and we believe there are allies in every sector. And as a result of the then Minister of Women and Children, of course, the whole government changed just a couple of months ago, but because of the results of the program, the new minister is continuing with the program, and the rate of child drowning has reduced by 70%. This is all a question of building trust, of becoming vulnerable ourselves so that we resonate with authenticity, and our team is amazing at that. And finally, building the kind of trust in the group, which is extremely hard to do, especially in government agencies. So the final example that I'll use is in Ethiopia, where we've been working for about 13 years in the area of agriculture. And as you probably know, they've been engaged in a civil war. It's made it impossible to get to certain parts of the country. But in working with the Ministry of Agriculture, whose presence and way of behaving and the results they've achieved and the way they've reached out to the unions of farmers and to agribusinesses has not only produced results in the field in terms of reduced hunger and increase of small producers' income, but other ministries have taken notice and are suddenly coming to our leader there, who's an Ethiopian, of course, himself, and saying, what have you got? There's something you've got that we want. This is how it actually spreads. And so it's resulted not only with the finance ministry and I think it's commercial trade, but also the ministries of irrigation and water and power deciding to go through a training program similar to that we did with the Ministry of Agriculture, and them developing an MOU, realizing that the problems of agriculture are not just agriculture, they include all of those other areas as well. And because of that, there's a feeling in the context of huge conflicts, huge difficulties that are preventing a lot of other results from happening. But there is a feeling of, okay, we could do this differently. And there's a way that we can reach out beyond our own little ministry where we've been, they didn't say this, I'm saying it, hiding behind our authority and work with others in a way that actually can produce completely different results. So I would just say that building trust allows for vulnerability, which allows for authenticity, which then brings the human potential out of each of the individuals and allows them greater willingness and capacity to reach out beyond their own safety zones and divides to work with people who are actually experiencing the problems and who need to be included in the problem solving and not just the recipients of aid. Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy. And Aitor, you run an organization in Costa Rica specialized in multi-stakeholder partnerships in Latin America. And I've had the pleasure to work with your organization for almost 2 years now. It's called ALIARSE, and it was also the first IDG Centre, focal point for all the movement of IDGs in your country. Your organization also has a very instrumental role in rolling out the IDG capacity development program called Global Leadership for Sustainable Development in Latin America, where we are working together, where we are simultaneously facilitating the integration of inner development on individual, organizational, and systemic level. Share some of that experience with us.
Thank you, Åsa. Thank you, the IDGs, for inviting us to this great event. I see you all. ALIARSE means to partner. 17 years ago, 12 public and private enterprises agreed to create a platform that will promote collaboration, multi-stakeholder collaboration, and more specifically, public-private collaboration, to overcome the huge challenges that we face in Costa Rica: poverty, education, lack of employment, health, or now security with narco. Thanks to the collaboration of 160 organizations, we have impacted more than 2 million people in the region, most of them in poverty and vulnerable conditions. By the way, Jan, looking at that photo, we might consider organizing the event next year in Costa Rica. Partnership is a complex mix of art and science. For many years, we developed tools that we even translated to softwares on how to plan, develop KPIs, business model for partnerships. And we learned that partnership goes at the speed of trust and the capacities to connect, co-create, and work of the individuals that represent the partners of the partnerships. So the IDGs are a great model to promote the skills that we need to make collaboration more effective. And I will say we have passed from an organization that was very much focused on the objectives of the partners and the partnerships into a people-centric organization. And this is changing our organization. We put first, obviously, our beneficiaries, but we also put our colleagues and the individuals that represent the partners in the heart of all that we do. How are we doing that? I was told. Okay, sorry. I understand what's the problem. Well, going through a big internal journey in the organization to understand what the IDGs are. So all the director and middle management staff have gone through the IDGs program, training program. We have gone through the self-assessment, IDG self-assessment, which allow us to get to know each other better and to know the competencies and capacities of our colleague and define teams that are complementary to facilitate partnerships in a much more effective way. This is a photo of one of our workshops. In terms of, and we obviously include the IDGs in the recruitment process with exercises about the individuals participating in the recruitment, comparing their values with the organizational values, and many other things, especially our well-being program. And all this is part of the personal development of the colleagues of ALIARSE. In terms of how we are promoting the IDGs in the partnerships, we are investing a lot of energy and money on creating more capacities to facilitate partnerships. And that requires to facilitate, as we heard this morning, with the heart, much more with the heart and connect people. We have incorporated the IDGs in our training programs, partnership programs. Yes, and obviously we are developing the skills, IDG skills in our partnerships, critical skills like active listening, relationship building, and trust building amongst the individuals that participated in our partnerships. Costa Rica was the first country to sign the national agreement for the IDGs, and we obviously are promoting or facilitating workshops on how to incorporate IDGs in public policy programs. We also work with the Congress. It's not easy. We started, we are enthusiastic about it, and it's a long journey for sure. We are actually, as Åsa has mentioned, co-facilitating the GLSD program for Latin America. 300 people currently participate in a program that is incorporating people from Central America down to Chile. And we are very pleased to celebrate this year the establishment of the center in Peru and in Colombia, and we work hard to create more centers in Latin America to scale up this work. Education, as we know and we heard this morning, is going to be critical for that. There won't be, we won't transform this unless we incorporate it in the education systems, especially the public education systems. And thanks to Barkey Foundation, this year we co-facilitated a workshop on how to incorporate IDGs into the public education with ministers and secretaries of different countries in Latin America. We also have found some exciting examples, like this school. By the way, the director of the school, Gloria, is in the room, who has incorporated in the curricula the IDGs, and many other organizations like companies. The National Company of Chocolate in Colombia has incorporated the IDGs in the leadership programs of the cacao producer women in the country. The idea is to keep working hard to make sure that the IDG agenda help us connect individuals to achieve the global goals that we are all hoping to achieve, despite their complexities. And that's our mission in Costa Rica, but always supporting the processes in Latin America as well.
Thank you, Aitor. And Gloria, you are here somewhere, and you will be sharing more of, where are you, Gloria?
Yeah.
You're going to share more in the track 4 tomorrow on education. Now, when you hear this, it sounds easy, but can you imagine how they have had to use their IDG capacities? Can you think of which capacities were important when they're facing the various challenges you can face, whether it's in Ethiopia, in the White House, in the UN, or in Latin America? Would you like to mention one? Courage. Perseverance.
But
Optimism. Anybody here?
resilience.
Resilience.
Presence.
Presence.
Caring, sharing, and daring.
Caring, sharing, and daring.
Patience.
Being, relating, and relating, collaborating, and acting. Beautiful.
Patience.
Patience, yes. And many more. And trust, you mentioned already, Peggy. Before we leave, I mean, people may think, oh, they can do it, but I can never do it. How can you, what is your advice to people out here or who are following us online if they want to facilitate the integration of inner development beyond the individual integration, to really change this world by integrating it into organizations and even into systems? Would you like to start, Kirsten?
Sure. I would just say, imagine our collective future and work back from there.
Start with the end in mind. Beautiful. Masamba?
So just displays the aspect of inner development that you have developed by acting and interacting, because the positive emotion that you are creating will be what help people join.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for us as facilitators, getting out of the way some of our fear, shame, anger, grief, which will never completely resolve, but so that we will be able to be present and therefore authentic to whoever it is we're working with. And that's what begins to build the chains of trust that are necessary to move this forward with diverse groups.
Thank you. Trust again.
Trust is the currency of collaboration, and I think we need more leadership. And everyone here is a leader in the organizations. If we can all leave the room today thinking that we should be more active facilitating trust and connecting people, especially from those that don't think like us, and organizations to work together, I think we can move faster. So it's on us. We need more leadership, and it's all in our hands.
Kristen, Masamba, Peggy, and Aitor, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your insights, and your inspiration. Let's give them a big hand.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for showcasing the potential of integrating inner work and IDGs into organizations and systems, for sharing your story and your advice.